This episode brought to you by Peter Wood's Museum of the Impossible.
What's a Museum of the Impossible? It's gonna be like Harry Potter meets Ripley's Believe It or Not. It'll be a one-of-a-kind, themed, interactive space where people can experience the impossible. But I need your help. To get the project started, I've set up a Patreon over at museumoftheimpossible.com. If you're able to throw a few bucks my way each month, we can build it together. Thanks for your support, and I can't wait to welcome you into the Museum of the Impossible. Welcome to the podcast of the Impossible. I'm Peter Wood, and my guest today travels the globe reading thoughts and making people laugh, but that's just his day job. On today's episode, we're going to nerd out about Disney theme parks. Please welcome star of stage and screen, Eric Dittelman.
Hey,
hello.
Thanks for having me.
We're throwing away all the magic and mentalism. We're just going to talk about Disney. This is a Disney episode. No,
really?
I don't
okay,
know.
Great.
So I see on the social, you show up at the Disney theme parks from time to time.
Yeah.
What are some highlights for you? What sort of, why are you drawn or interested in Disney parks?
Well, I got to tell you, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the Disney parks
because
I have a sort of traumatic story that's become a stand-up bit now, but I was actually broken up with at Disney World.
What? Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh,
the
my.
happiest place on earth, not for me.
Yeah.
But
man.
no. I mean, I'm way over that now. But it was I just always loved going to the parks and just when you're somewhere, sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I love going to the parks and seeing all the new rides. And I'm just a ride junkie. So even like if I have a day off, I'll go for like the whole day and just try to hit as many things as possible.
Nice.
Obviously, seeing the classics, the Haunted Mansion, of course, being a favorite, which
Sure.
wasn't when I was a child.
Oh, okay.
I was more scared of the Peter Pan ride though, because I thought I was going to fall into the abyss there. But a legend from my family thought like I was scared of Peter Pan, but fine on Haunted Mansion. But my mom recently told me no, that wasn't the case. I also cried the whole time on Haunted Mansion.
Okay, sure. That's good.
But
consistent.
But now it's one of my favorites, of course, especially with the magic, element to it, and
Sure.
the stretching room and the ballroom ghosts. It's fantastic.
Yeah. No, and do you get out enough to like Disneyland versus Disney World? Do you have sort of favorites or so you want to do the OG? You get to Florida more. What's sort of your feeling on that?
I just tend to be in Florida more just for
Okay.
work and other things, but I try to get to LA. And, the thing about visiting LA is I just got to make sure I have a friend who can drive me all the way to Anaheim.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's
we can
true.
go. But yeah, no, to even just like, the fact that they have Star Wars now, it's everything. I mean, I was jokingly saying how like, oh, I shouldn't be dating someone that's into Disney, but that's harder and harder to do now that Disney owns everything. So that's kind of like saying I don't want to date someone who likes restaurants. It's
Right.
like-
Right.
So you have they just have everything I like. So I love Disney so much.
Just start looking to pick up people on like the DC Comics forums. Like, is there one?
Yeah.
Where's the Bastion?
Not Marvel related.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The real serious Batman, Superman people. Yeah. So our mutual friend Carolyn Gale has introduced me to several people as this is my friend Peter. He has a Haunted Mansion bathroom. And what I love about that is that like, for most of my life, this is my friend Peter. He's a magician. And so it's always fun. That also sort of shows that I'm truly in showbiz. I have another friend who has introduced me as that also again to magician people where it's like, okay, the most interesting thing about Peter is not that he's okay, sure. Everyone here is a magician, but did you know that he has a bathroom that looks like the Haunted Mansion?
So fantastic.
When
the wallpaper and everything. Yeah.
Well, the wallpaper, I did a bunch of, found high res scans, but then also used reference photos to get a sense of what the actual scale is supposed to be, because a lot of the stuff that you'll find that people do online, it's much too small. Like it's very repeated. But yeah, it's been it's an ongoing project. If anyone's curious, it is on there. It has an Instagram account. It's HM Bathroom on Instagram. And I
That's
just
so funny.
I love that a bathroom in my house has followers on Instagram. It's really it cracks me up,
Yeah,
But
I was lucky to acquire a vintage Haunted Mansion poster, and it's
nice.
framed underneath it with a vintage pin and e-ticket.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
yeah, so I'm excited that I have that in my collection.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's, I mean, I'm sure there's some, I don't remember, I remember being scared of the Haunted Mansion, like not just fear of the unknown, and then by the
Mhm.
time you get through it, you realize that that is the scariest part. I mean, there are a couple of things that sort of jump out, but in general, it's mostly
Mhm.
just, it's dark and I don't know what's going to happen. But I am really curious, like there are so many, I find a lot of overlaps between magicians and folks who love the Haunted Mansion. And I mean, I assume it's just sort of the magic. I mean, the larger word magic, just sort of whimsy. Even though like what you're doing in your show is completely opposite from a Pepper's Ghost illusion. It's not like you're using any of those methods, but I'm always interested to sort of see where if you do find there any overlaps between your love of that and has it ever influenced or informed your show or something you're doing?
Yeah, well, I think also for me, not only just the magic elements that are involved in that ride, but the gravestones all being puns as a pun fanatic.
Sure, that's true.
You
Yeah.
gotta love those. But I think it's just anything like Disney and any of these other theme parks do well is the immersion, and you're
Uh,
creating experience. So the moment you walk into the queue, you're also starting to be in this world of the Haunted Mansion or just any of the other rides. And I think
yeah.
if we're providing an experience for our audiences to see what elements they're using to tell a story and how we can adapt that in the same way. It's kind of similar. I was just talking to a friend of mine because they were commenting on how many Broadway shows I've been to because in my downtime, I live in New York. I was like, I might as well just see everything that's playing,
Sure.
when I have the time and money to do so. But it's like we're in a theatrical art form. And to see how other people who have mastered this art form that putting up shows, seeing you can learn something from the stagecraft or the blocking, or even I try to see as many one person shows as possible because that's the best analog for what we're doing is
Sure.
going on stage and being a one person show, and you have to entertain and captivate an audience. So it's like it seems silly for me that more magicians aren't going to more theater or aren't seeing more of these types of shows or experiences just to see where you can draw from. There's the great books like Steal Like an Artist or like all these creative things where if you steal from one person specifically, that's theft. But if you're taking a lot of ideas from a lot of different places, that's called inspiration, and
Totally.
that helps inform what you're doing. So,
What
yeah.
what are some things that you've seen in one person shows that have influenced your one person show? Like, do you have an example or in particular, or just sort of is more ephemeral feeling type stuff?
Yeah, it's just kind of a general vibe. I'm sure there are specifics that I've pulled, but they're also embedded in my show now. But I just
Sure.
even seeing how different people structure their shows,
Yeah.
because a lot of times you see like, oh, I'm going to present this thing, then this thing, then this thing, but like to then Darren Brown obviously did it really well of first on my radar of putting a story arc to the show and then
Right.
having things call back. Derek Delgadio's show, of course, has,
Sure.
different element. It didn't feel like a magic show because of the story that was there. I just saw this great show in New York, Steve Schiffo, called The Simulacrum, where it's about the creative process of itself. And he has a director that he met with during the pandemic where they broke down how they were going to create a theatrical magic show together. And the show that ends up being presented for us, the audience, is a recreation of these sessions, but it's a one-man show. So the director's voice is all on a tape recorder and
Oh,
he's
wow.
performing to a tape recorder and doing his part live. So like just taking things and seeing little ways that people break out of the traditional way of what we think of a magic show,
Right.
or just any idea, any concept to think outside the box is always inspiring to me to be like, how can we do this differently? How can this not feel like what everyone else is doing? So
Yeah, well, and just, I mean, yeah, iterative, and also, I mean, especially living there, that this is sort of the level that people are expecting these days, and so even if I'm not necessarily talking about budget, but just about thought that you've put into it, I think that we are beyond the days of just here's a trick, here's a trick, here's a trick, like trying to, even if it's callbacks or some sort of a through thread, like just something that kind of helps to to make it a little bit more of a theatrical experience as opposed to just a series of demonstrations, you know?
Yeah, or even like look at Penn and Teller, for example. They don't have a through arc through their show, but each piece has something to say. There's a reason they're doing it. There's some sort of underlying. So I think I'm more in that model still myself, and I'm still trying to break out into like more of a theatrical, like almost like Fringe style show that all these people are putting together. But yeah, one of these days I'll get back to writing the full theater show.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I draw a line between a commercial artist and an artist. I have some friends, you know, who've done some really artsy stuff, and they still have their day job, you know, and it's I have a lot of respect for that, but I also I do think it is our responsibility as, you know, people who do this as our jobs to find like, how can we still be artistic and relevant, but at the same time it needs to be something that people want to see and that people are willing to pay for, you know?
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think the show that I have is, you know, creatively artistic and commercial, so people want to see it.
Right.
I definitely have an artistic side where I want to try the weirder stuff that can alienate a lot of audiences as well. But then also, I mean, I do the gigs too that are just commercial with no art, and sometimes you're just throwing in a company message because like, oh, they're paying me well enough to do so.
Yep.
And I just have to get better at not sounding like I have a gun to my head saying their message.
Sure.
But yeah, happy to do those gigs.
You know, yeah, it
supports the other ones. Yeah, exactly.
Agreed. Well, and I think that, you know, the variety is still important. Like you couldn't do that every Saturday night, but if you can do that, if you do that from time to time, and like you say, and if that sort of offsets some other, you know, a cabaret show that is particularly artistically gratifying, but maybe didn't have quite the box office success as a corporate something, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious. You have a new venture in Ohio, is that right?
Just a one-off or two nights.
Okay,
but it's just,
okay.
Me and Michael Kent are doing a show called, we just named it Astonished. Basically, we're like, let's do a show together. We've been good friends through the college market for a long time. So I was coming through Columbus.
Cool.
So I was like, let's rent a space. Just, you know, he's going to do some pieces. I'm going to do some pieces. We might do a couple together and just have a good time of fun comedy, magic, and mentalism. So,
okay.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be touring it, but it just happened to work out that, you know, we try that one. And I am trying some other new ventures. I launched a new show in New York called Awestruck, which is sort of a late night style variety show where I'm the host and I do an opening monologue. But then the problem I saw in New York is a lot of variety shows are all within one discipline. So there's a lot of magic variety shows, a bunch of magicians, or a lot of comedy variety shows, a bunch of comics, but nothing that truly had everything on it, kind of like the old school Carson, you know, where they had the variety acts on. So, you know, our first show we had balloon artist and magician John Cassidy, so he's very manic. Then we had a singer-songwriter, my friend Emma Jude, just performed and does looping, and then Harrison Greenbaum came in from Las Vegas and does comedy but also magic as well. So it was a true variety of everything, even though magic was sort of a through line. And then interviewing them and having my own little Paul Schaefer, my friend Alex Harris, you know, was looping and playing sax on the side in between. So the first show went really well, and now we're just figuring out more dates coming up and working with the venue on that. So tune in to see when the next Awestruck show will be. But it's been a lot of fun, and we're gonna just keep that variety going. And it's fun writing monologue jokes, because as soon as you say them, since they're topical, they're burnt. And especially without a late night on right now, it was kind of nice to have a fresh crack at all these topics.
You don't have to, for better or worse, you don't have to worry about Jimmy Kimmel stealing the same joke from you, right? You know?
Exactly. Right. That's what I said when I started. I go, you know, we're just like any other late night show, except we can curse, and we're happening right now.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah. So what you know, I guess you were watching, going to shows in New York, and you were finding that variety wasn't. I mean, the variety shows you were seeing were still like variety within a subset. And it sounds like the audience response was pretty, I mean, like that people were excited to have that true variety coming back to it.
Yeah, and it's just the fact that we had an amazing venue that just looked gorgeous,
Okay.
and the fact that there's music set beforehand and everyone's kind of drinking. It's like this late night feel. So that's
Sure.
the vibe we're really going with. So, it's might end up being a monthly thing. It might be a sporadic thing. We're still figuring that out. But
Cool.
always just trying to find different ventures. Similar to like when I moved to New York and just started my Amazeball show. It was just a place for me to try and be bad and to like it was a free
Yeah.
show for the audience. Like we talked about last time of just anyone can try new things and
Right.
they might work or not. And we had crazy stories that happened there. But during the pandemic, the venue we were doing that actually moved. I didn't know a venue could move, but they moved to Austin, Texas. It became like a
Oh, wow.
big comedy club. And I was going to fly down and be like, I'm here for my monthly show. It's a bit of a commute, but I'll try to
Right.
make it. But so no, you find other things when some ventures end, you find a new way to pivot. And in the downtime, I jump onto the Speakeasy Magic Show here in New York too. So I'm
Yeah.
busy when I'm home and not on the road. So finding downtime is tricky. But,
Yeah. Well, I want to hear more about Speakeasy. I know a little bit. I haven't had a chance to experience it myself. It sure does sound like a great way to see close up magic and mentalism. Is that your feeling?
yeah. Yeah, I'm not in the regular crew, but I do pop
Okay.
in when I can and when I'm needed and from
Okay.
time to time. So like it's definitely if you're going there just to see me, check in with me first.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically speed dating with magicians. So
Okay.
you're sat down at a table and there's a close-up performer there and we
Right.
do small sets and then we rotate around and you see about 4 or 5 different magicians a night plus some stage acts as well, but it's really bringing everything intimate and close up. And definitely there's challenges working in a dimly lit, very noisy, tables on
Right.
top of each other environment, but these are some of the best magicians in New York, so finding ways to adapt and make that situation work. It's
Yeah.
an amazing experience for the audience who comes, and just having this whole speakeasy vibe to it helps as well. So
Oh yeah. No,
yeah.
it seems, and thankfully, I mean, with New York, folks are already sort of seeking out those types of experiences. I mean, there's a little bit of marketing and sort of communication that has to happen, but it's more likely to thrive in New York than in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm guessing,
Maybe, I don't know. There's different markets. People want to go out and experience new things.
That's
So,
true.
and just like we were talking with Disney, it's all about the experience and getting that vibe. And the moment you kind of step into
Sure.
the environment, you get sucked in, and you talk about it and tell all your friends. So.
Right. Yeah. No, just the idea of something behind a hidden door. I mean, that marketing on its own, like that is a story that you'll tell your friends more than we went to Six Flags on Saturday.
Right.
That definitely makes sense. So I'm curious when you're doing that's more proper close up, but do you do like strolling mentalism? Do you do walk around? And how do you sort of approach that differently than when you're doing something on stage?
Yeah, I have a specific set I do for that show. That's I never loved the idea of interrupting people. So the fact that there's a set audience and then they know there's going to be someone sitting down, you can kind of just do a close up set.
Yeah.
I've done strolling and I do strolling for certain corporate events, but it's usually as a prelude to the stage show. So
Right.
an approach that I do just for my own comfortability, because again, I don't like interrupting people, is just to be like, hey, I'm warming up for the stage show tonight. So let me show you a few things and then I'll hop around and kind of entertain. And the whole point is that everyone's kind of breaking the ice and your goal is to get groups of people together and to intermingle. So even just saying I'm the mind reader and I'm going to be performing tonight, I don't necessarily have to do anything after that. They'll want to see something, but then that gets people talking and then excited for the show later. So that's kind of how I approach this, the strolling and walk around stuff when I have to do it.
No, that makes and I mean, you're building rapport, not only between you and the audience, but also, like you say, you're helping to break the ice. You're creating maybe groups where there weren't before. And yeah, anytime I have that, the luxury, it always, it feels like you're starting the show, hitting the ground running. It is much easier because there might even already be inside jokes or callbacks, or at least just that guy is going to be a lot of fun, or you want to watch out for that one or whatever. So
there is a tricky balance every time, though, because the one thing that, especially when you see a mentalist, because it's so, in your head and people can't see any sleight of hand or moves, the one go-to everyone just thinks is it's all set up. The person's in on it.
Yep.
So I have to be careful, especially doing anything prior to the show, whether walking around through the audience or even just strolling, doing that to make sure that they're like, no, nothing is set up. We have not prearranged anything. Because again, when there's no explanation, they'll go to that. And even with the TV stuff, when you're using like the AGT judges, they just think, oh, they're all in on it. It's like, no, I specifically tried to get a real reaction out of them. So, they're the surrogate for the audience watching at home. So
sure. Well, and I mean, I think you can drive yourself bonkers with that. I feel like some magicians, and mentalist mystery performers, they stop thinking too early, but then others will obsess over that. Like, you want to go as far as you can to let people know that there aren't stooges, plants, Confederates, but at the same time, at some point, how do you convince everyone of that? Do you have any sort of like guidelines, or when you're putting it together routine, are there sort of things that you look for to be like, oh, I need to change this so no one thinks that it was set up beforehand?
It's more of a structure throughout the rest of the stage show. Is I'll hit it a couple times at the start to, and I even have a little disclaimer, the way I do a disclaimer at the start, that fits my personality, just to know like, hey, this isn't, true psychic powers, because that's not what my persona presents anyway. Sure. I kind of just drive that home, and then the first couple people I bring up and I reiterate, like, we haven't talked beforehand. But at a certain point, like you're saying, if you do that over and over again, it's going to get tedious, and people are going to know just by the sheer fact I'm using so many people in the show that, if they were all on my payroll, I'd go broke pretty fast.
Right.
But
yeah.
But I think, it's going to build. And even with the disclaimer, I think there's parts towards the end of the show, because they've been seeing me, get thoughts out of people's heads for an hour, that people are going to still leave with their preconceived notions. And it's you can't dissuade everyone from what they're going to want to believe. Yeah, sure.
No, I mean, I feel like that person's in on it is almost like it was up his sleeve, like it's just a thing that people say that they don't really know what it means, but it's like, well, I can't sleep at night without an answer. So I'm just going to throw this out because it's irrefutable. And then now I'm fine. So I guess if that's how they want to enjoy your show, then hopefully they still enjoyed it,
Exactly.
Well, this was great. Thank you again so much for popping on here with me, and
thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it was a good. I love poker. Even though I'm sorry for anyone who wanted this to be an all Disney episode. I want to get a little bit into to mentalism. So where you want to head out online is going to be ericdittelman.com. That's EricDittelman.com, or at eDittelman on the social networks. But Dittelman, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun.
I appreciate it. And thank you for our friend listening. And that is going to do it for this episode of the Podcast of the Impossible. But for behind the scenes access to my Museum of the Impossible project, as well as info about my public shows, private events, social media, and more, you can head on over to peterwood.com. I'm Peter Wood. Thanks.